Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. I can see people, quite a few people have already joined. Wow, this is really cool. I'm quite excited, as Chris was saying, to be part of these office hours. And we're trying something different this time around. So what I would like to do this time is introduce the Live Lab that we have created for JavaScript, server-side JavaScript. And as we do, you'll go through the various labs and you've got the opportunity to ask any questions you might have as part of the completion of the Live Lab or anything else that you would like to know in the context of, server-side JavaScript. And since the Live Lab has been kind of written for a 90-minute session, we have 60 minutes. It's highly unlikely we're going to all finish within the allotted time frame. So don't worry about that. The Live Lab is going to stay online. It's recently been updated, and I keep updating it as well as we progress into the next year. And you can start any of the Live Labs as many times as you like. With that being said, the agenda for today, the welcome stuff is already covered. I'll go and have a quick introduction, then we talk about in-database JavaScript while the Live Labs are going to be provisioned in the background. That takes about 10 minutes. Gives me time to talk about JavaScript and also you time to ask any questions if you like. And then it's hands-on time, so you'll go and follow the instructions in the Live Lab. I think 5 to 10 minutes before the hour, I'm going to kind of pause and give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have, and I'd also put on some online resources that we have created for further experiments with the platform. Okay, well, as I say, I'm super excited to see so many people here, quite a large number of attendees, which is nice. My name is Martin. I joined Oracle a couple of years ago, so I'm already in my third year, and I've been part of Chris's team and Jared's team, so we're working together in various things. So let's start with the Live Lab. So the Live Lab requirements are pretty basic. All you need is a laptop. You probably have one if you're connected already, and you need an Oracle account. Nothing else. Everything else works kind of from a browser. So what's going to happen next is I'd like to ask you to get started creating the Live Lab, because it'll take 10 minutes for the environment to be provisioned, after which you get a URL, or you just need to click on a button, and that opens a browser window where you'll find the instructions on your left-hand side and a terminal on the right-hand side, so you'll get a Linux desktop. So the link is already in the chat. So you just click on that, you'll see the page to the right here. And please use the sign in to the top right there to sign in with your Oracle account, which is not a cloud tenancy account. If you've got an OCI tenancy, this is your Oracle SSO account, something you'd use to download software from Oracle, or you'd post to the forums. So that would be the first step. Once you have logged in, you will see that your name is in the top right, where the sign in button used to be. And you next click on the start button, and it's important to say run on Live Labs sandbox, like the green button. You click on that, and there is a little pop-up that opens, and here you see your time zone. You can leave that as is. It's important to then say start workshop now, and you need to tick that box that I consent to receive emails. And these emails, I'm told, are not going to be used for any announcements or whatever about Oracle products. They are really needed just to tell you that your provisioned environment has been created and is ready to use. That's what it's for. So you need to tick that box, and then you submit the reservation. So start workshop now. I consent to receive emails from Live Labs, and you click on submit reservation, which opens the next page, which is called My Reservations. And in here, you then see that it is going to take a minute or two. In my case, it was 11 minutes when I last tried it, to provision that environment which we're going to use, which is now. If you could, follow all these steps, keep an eye on the chat to see if anyone's got any problems. But that'll be kind of the first step towards creating the environment. And whilst this is running for everyone, this is a good moment to talk about in-database JavaScript. And I'm going to cover Multilingual Engine for JavaScript in a nutshell. I don't want to do too much of an introduction to it because you will use that quite excessively in the next live labs. So just so much. JavaScript is a first-class citizen language now in the database, beginning with 21C, where the feature has been initially productionized. It existed previously as a prototype. I think it was 2018 when the work began to merge the prototype into the Oracle database as such. The prototype was, kind of a showcase of what the feature would be able to do, but it wasn't quite ready there. So the every feature in the database needs to be tightly integrated with the rest of the packages, like resource manager needs to work, memory management needs to work, I/O, and these things. It's all very tightly integrated. In 21C, you could run code dynamically. So you see little text box to the right where you define JavaScript as a glob, or it could be a varchar if you've got fewer characters requirements. And you then take that glob and you create what we call a context. And then you evaluate that JavaScript code as part of the context for the JavaScript language. And whatever you defined in that glob will then be executed. And afterwards, you drop the context to save the memory allocations that have been created as the code was executed. So that's the first way you could use JavaScript in the database. And in 23C, in database 23C, a lot of new features have been added. One of the problems with this approach, for example, is that you're mixing PL/SQL and JavaScript, which is difficult, especially if you're using CI pipelines or continuous integration pipelines. You can't lint the code because no linter knows more than one language, at least no linter to my knowledge. So that'll be a first. So in 23C, what you can do instead is you can create a new schema object, and these are represented in the dictionary, as you will see in your course. So you create a thing called an MLE module, and there's new syntax for that, create MLE module, and then you define the language, and anything after the as is JavaScript code. So in here, you can see that hello module has a function called hello. And we're using ECMAScript modules for that. Anything else is in the JavaScript world we won't support. ECMAScript is the standard, so we went with that. And once you've done this, you can also expose this functionality in the JavaScript module in a function. And this is a core specification. And if you've ever used Java in the database, it's the same principle. So you've got a PL/SQL kind of shell or a name, and instead of a function body you would normally have, you point to a function in a module, and that's what you can do. And once that's done, you can select as you would, or you can run any code as you would run PL/SQL or SQL. So that's what you can do. And if you just have a simple module, like in the previous example, where you're just running a little thing, which is easy in JavaScript, but you don't want to write an entire module with a single function, you could use something we call an inline JavaScript function, where you see it's the same idea, but unlike in PL/SQL, you specify as MLE language JavaScript, and then you provide the code in Q quotes or in any string really. And then you can use this function, and you don't have to define a module and then a core spec before you can call it. So this is a simplification. What you can also do is you can debug the code. We name this post-execution debugging, which is really neat. It's part of the Live Lab. There is background compilation, there's JSON and Solr support. So those things are available to you in 23C. One of the first questions I get when I'm presenting is JavaScript going to replace PL/SQL or Java? No, it's not intended as a replacement. It's the idea with JavaScript in the database really is to build a bigger tent, open the doors to more developers who may not necessarily be familiar with PL/SQL or Java. JavaScript is certainly one of the most widely used languages out there. And if you look at some of the surveys and Stack Overflow and the like, you will see that JavaScript is always on the top. So it gives And it opens the door to server-side development to more programmers, really. And there's documentation, so you'll see that later on in the live labs, but there is an API reference that we published about the modules that we ship. So there is a SQL driver, there are bindings for data types, and there is a fetch API, and we also have a base64 encoding, so things that were needed to run some of the web APIs that people might be familiar with. And they are all documented on GitHub in oraclesamples.github.io, MLE modules. And then you've got the user guide for JavaScript, which has 9 chapters as of now, which goes, it follows the same idea as the live lab, where we take you through why JavaScript, how to use it, and the bits and bobs and all the relevant information that you might need. So the live lab, just to give you an idea how it's going to be, so you start off with fully hands-on. We'll give you a community module. You will create the community module as an MLE module inside the database, and you make use of some functionality within that module. And that gives you an idea of the workflow end to end. And the other modules, or the other labs as part of the live labs, they are building on top of this. So we go in depth on MLE modules and environments and how to create them on the command line and in the browser, how to expose JavaScript to SQL and PL/SQL, interact with the database using the SQL driver. And then there are optional modules because we might not be able to get to those. And you'll learn about the SODA, so the document API and post-execution debugging. And by now, the reservations that you have created earlier, they should slowly starting to get ready. So what you should see on the My Reservations page, now that you have created or initialized the creation of the live lab, you should see the launch workshop button. So once you click on that launch workshop, you get a page with the live lab's contents. And there's a little link on the top left there called View Login Info. So if you click that, you will see the reservation information where you get the remote desktop URL and so on and so forth. But all you need to do is really click on Launch Remote Desktop. And that will open another window in your browser, which looks like this. And that's the environment you're going to work with. So you see on the left-hand side, there are the instructions. On the right-hand side, you've got a virtual machine with Oracle Database 23c free available for use. So there's no restriction on the database. Network I/O is kind of cut for security reasons, but besides everything else you would expect from a local VM or a container is available for you to use. One thing I would like to point out is you see on the left-hand side of the instructions on the browser window, you will see a table of contents. This can be a bit distracting. So if you don't want to see that, and if you would like to make use of the full width of the browser window, you click on the hamburger menu right next to the simple. Let me see if I can use the pen. So you can click on this here, and that kind of hides the navigation menu. So you can then scroll down in the lab's contents, and you've got the full width of the browser window available. And for those of you who are not familiar with copy pasting in a in a Linux terminal, you will be able to copy like Control-C as you would typically do, and then you can use the edit menu here to paste, or you paste using Control-Shift-V. So you need to hold the Shift key in addition to just the Control key. And I think that's it. We've got questions in the Q&A. Let me
So I think my reservation still says it's got 3 minutes, so I'm guessing there's a little while before everyone's will be ready.
Let's get to the questions then.
Yeah, so it was asking, can you call your own JS functions from JS without a PL/SQL wrapper? I'm assuming that means within the database.
Yes. So this is totally possible. So you can have multiple modules, and they can invoke functionality. So you can have module A invoking functionality from module B, and that doesn't need to be exposed to the SQL or PL/SQL layer. And ultimately, you will have to expose one entry point into your code, which you will then call from within your application, but you can have nested hierarchies as deep as you like. And the way this works, and you will see this in a minute, is by means of a construct called the MLE environment. So in Node, if you develop in Node and you've got a module and then you have got another module from which calls the previous module, you just say require and then file name. But since we're not on the file system, we use an environment which maps the import name to an MLE module. And you will do this in the second lab. In create JavaScript modules and environments, there is an example for that.
Cool. Yeah, there was an earlier question about what methods are used to call JavaScript from JavaScript MLE. I'm not quite sure what it was. I thought that was kind of the slide you were showing, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to say there on that. Or
let me go back. Let's get started. No, that was. Now I need to get rid of my pen. I got rid of my pen. So I'm not sure. Can I see that?
I can see the answer.
Yes. What methods are used to call JavaScript from JavaScript MLE? Again, this is very much in the same line of question as before. You will see that in a minute, but if you've got hello module, you can import identifiers or functions or everything from hello module in hello module 2 or by module, and then you could call a function there. But there will be an example for this in the live lab.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good. Sounds like the live lab is going to show us a lot of the stuff that we need to know here.
I very much hope so.
That's the plan, right? That's the idea.
That's the plan.
Exactly.
Okay, so we were here on this one.
Yes. Okay, so another question's come in.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you please give me some real life examples where PL SQL cannot do what I needed? Instead, I have to go to JavaScript.
I don't like the competition, the idea of competition between JavaScript and PL SQL. I think they complement each other, but when would you choose JavaScript over PL SQL? I mean, if your background is JavaScript, so let's say you've been writing Node.js applications for a long time, and now you would like to make use of data locality and all the cool features within the Oracle database, you move the app from the middle tier into the database. So that would be one reason to write JavaScript code. Secondly, the community, the JavaScript community, provides a huge ecosystem of code that you may be able to use. I mean, it's always, you always need to check the licenses, and you need to ask your security teams and compliance teams whether the license is compatible with the project you're working on. But let's assume it is. And you can benefit from pre-created JavaScript code that you just import into the database and make use of that functionality without you having to worry about those things. And you will see that when you get started in Lab 1. I'd like to. It's a long time ago, but back at uni, we did a test in computer science, and we had to validate email addresses in PL SQL. And that was before regular expressions existed. So that's kind of 9i times. And that was a lot of work. And we really had to rack our brains around that, how to do the string separation and parsing and just making sure it's a valid email address. The same thing, fast forward now, you can do by importing this validator module you're going to use in a minute, and just, invoke the function is email and give it a string, and it'll tell you it's true or false. So that's kind of where I see this as well. Making use of the community modules if you can, and save time and focus on, adding more stuff to your application rather than repetitive and, reinventing the wheel, so to say.
Yeah. So it's mostly like you can't stuff that it's not that you can't do it in PL SQL. It just saves you having to, like you say, reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, like templating, for example. If you would like to use a templating engine, that's also a good example which works really nicely in JavaScript.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question come in. They have one question. Can we get, and how can we know the IP and machine name? I know it's not possible with PL SQL. Interesting.
I mean, you of your own server. I suppose
I
you would
assume,
have.
yeah.
I'd have to. Don't know off the top of my head. Um, because I mean, speaking of JavaScript, there are certain things you can't do in Oracle database. You don't have, and regardless of technology, you don't have unrestricted access to network, and you don't have unrestricted access to file system, because the idea is that a malicious actor could, open a network connectivity to some remote source and just transfer confidential information over the wire. So that's not possible. Since 11.1, we need to have those network access control lists allowing outgoing and inbound network traffic. The other thing is we can't just write to the file system, because you can imagine that somebody dumps malicious code on the database and it's writing secret information into a dump file, and somebody just takes that. So there are certain restrictions which have to be worked around by means of an API. So like I said, the network echoes and also the UTL file dear idea. So in the end, it means for the JavaScript engine, we can't just use some of the npm modules out there, because they write temp files, and that's not possible. So there is a restriction, and I'm not. And long story short, I'm not entirely sure if we can kind of retrospect or inspect the code and get the IP address. It's a good question. I'll post the answer on Twitter later.
Yeah. I'd be surprised too, right? Like, say, for those security reasons.
Yeah, it might be tricky to access that information, but hey, it's a good question. I'll follow up on it.
Yeah.
Need to take a note.
Yes, another interesting question's come in. So, is there a context switch between the languages, or is it significant enough to cause issues? And is execution in JavaScript faster than PL SQL? The performance question everyone loves, right?
Performance questions, everyone's favorite. Hang on, I'll just take a quick note of get own IP address. Okay, right. So, in the short answer is, every time you switch from, say, SQL to PL SQL, or from SQL to Java, or from PL SQL to Java, any transition from one of those kind of broad areas, Oracle will need to kind of needs to understand what you're doing, and then understand which kind of code area within the database it needs to use in order to fulfill your request. And there is kind of a central dispatcher within the database, which is the reason why there are these context switches, say, between SQL and PL SQL. And the same applies to JavaScript as well. This is the way the database is designed, and the developers are very conscious of that fact, and we're trying our very best to minimize the impact. But I guess the things that we've been saying for a long time, like if you've got a PL SQL function in your where clause, and you're processing millions and millions of rows, there is a noticeable overhead. And the same is true for JavaScript. So we're not going to be able to make that entirely go away, but the dev team is actively working on feedback from our beta testers, and then putting in optimizations so that the performance of MLE is as good as it can get.
Cool.
I guess that was, yeah. But I can't really tell at the moment. We've run benchmarks, but benchmarks are kind of synthetic mostly in their nature, and it really depends on your systems, on how you're using your system, to get a good picture of what's going on. But if you've got anything, any comments, good or bad, I'd be happy to hear them. And also, if you've got a kind of a test case as well, that would allow us to look into the performance and make adjustments.
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, my workshop is ready now, so there's a couple more questions. Should we do those and then kind of look at the workshop?
Yeah, well, we can. I mean, everyone's free to go ahead and start with the hands-on lab. I'll put that slide on here because I like it. There's lots of live labs out there, and there is something for everyone's taste. But we can now chat about stuff. People can go ahead and start their workshops.
Okay, well.
So what's come up?
Yeah, we'll keep the questions coming in then. Yeah, someone was asking about importing AMD JavaScript modules that you would otherwise have to npm install.
So the way first of all, AMD modules, no, it's not supported. And anyone who may have used 21C JavaScript, you may remember that there was the require keyword as well. So the require keyword is staying in 23C, but it's deprecated, and we would like people to use the ECMAScript modules instead. So you use import and export keywords, and then whatever you want to import and export. AMD modules, the problem with those is that you sometimes get to see them on NPM, but most of the content delivery networks allow you to toggle between what type of module style you would like to use. And say, for instance, JS Deliver is one that we are using. You can just add a parameter and say you instruct it to get you the ECMAScript module. So you're not limited by that fact. An AMD module can always be rewrapped into an ECMAScript module, and most CDNs do that for you. So just make sure you use the ECMAScript module.
Cool. Something to watch out there for. And someone's saying that they found an interesting JavaScript library on the web, and with lots of files. So there's lots of files in the module or the library. And how do they do that? How do they use that?
Yeah, there are a couple of ways how you could do this. I mean, it's typically if you've got the library on the web, and there is an option in the CDN to kind of give you the rolled up version of it, that's what I would use. But if you find, sometimes you may find a module with multiple dependencies, and you would like to kind of bundle it all up as one MLE module rather than having 2 or 3 or 4 MLE modules. And that is possible using tools like Gulp or Rollup. And I have successfully done that. For instance, one of the use cases I'm following is unit testing, and you could unit test JavaScript code outside of the database when you use the client-side driver to connect, or you could do the unit test from within the database. But the framework that I was using is called Mocha, and it required on Chai for the assertion library. So I had to, Mocha is easy because Mocha doesn't have dependencies, but Chai does have dependencies. So in order to get the unit tests within the database to run, I used Rollup.js to create one file with all the code and load that as an MLE module.
Cool. That's interesting. It's interesting you talk about unit testing there, and it's like, so does this mean people can start accessing these JavaScript unit testing libraries and frameworks and stuff that exist now?
Yeah. So there is a community post about that. 2 trains of thought. One of them is I would like to do everything from the client side. I would like to do the development using VS Code or whatever editor you have. And then I'd like to have TypeScript ESLint and TypeScript, maybe to convert those TypeScript type-safe code examples into JavaScript. And you could do that outside of the database. And then you would also, if you think about a CI pipeline, typically you submit your JavaScript code to linting and later on to unit testing to make sure it adheres to your coding style and practices and everything that your team agreed upon. But then again, the unit framework can be run from within the database, or it can be run as part of the CI pipeline triggered from the outside. I mean, that's not to say that you can't trigger unit tests running inside the database from a CI pipeline, but I think the more natural flow for JavaScript developers would be to do that from the CI service side.
Cool, that's quite interesting. Another question. So someone's saying for Java OJVM in the database, we have a special JDBC driver which is based on pipes. How does JavaScript access the data? Are there or will there be functions to map JavaScript data structures to PL SQL and vice versa?
Okay, so that's a couple of questions. So the first one, how do we connect? I mean, the big advantage for us, the MLE team, is that we already have a session established. So we don't need to worry about credential stores, securely storing credentials especially in code repositories. So the way that you access the connection object, which is typically what you interact with in Node Oracle DB, is we injected a variable called session in the global scope. So you can say in your function F, session.execute, and then you give it a SQL string, and that SQL string is being executed, and you get a result object back. So you don't need to do anything other than use session.execute. So that gives you your kind of entry into the SQL driver. So there is no driver that you need to worry about. How does JS access data? JavaScript has and maybe I'll go back to that slide. I think it was this one. No, sorry. Not this one, that one. So there is a JavaScript SQL driver, which is documented here. And the SQL driver is very, very closely, resembles the Node Oracle DB driver very, very closely. The idea being that we want to minimize the efforts of anyone who wants supporting client-side code to the database. The Node Oracle DB driver uses promises or asynchronous functions a lot. And that is not necessary within MLE because everything happens synchronously in the database. So even though you can say async function foo, blah, blah, and then await connection execute, they are kind of silently dropped, those instructions, because everything happens synchronously. And you access any data structure, any function, any PL/SQL block, any whatsoever, in exactly the same way as you would do in Node Oracle DB. And if you look at the workshop, you will find that in, I think it's lab 6 or 5, where you're interacting with the database. So you're going to select from the database, and you're also going to insert and update. And you can also use the returning clause and all the good stuff. It's all supported. And then finally, are or will there be functions that map JS data structures to PL/SQL and vice versa? Yes. And this is this module, MLE PL/SQL types. So one of the most striking things in JavaScript is that they use a floating point number for their numbers. And there is no decimal data type in JavaScript. I mean, there have been attempts of creating a decimal type as part of the language, but that hasn't really got very far. And that's like years ago. What the JavaScript community does is they have an NPM module called decimal.js, I think it's called. And that allows you to do very precise calculations using the JavaScript data types. If you would like to do the same thing, and if you'd like to use Oracle data types in JavaScript, there are these MLE JS PL/SQL types that you can pick from, most notably number, because the Oracle number is more precise than the JavaScript number. And yeah, you can use them in your code.
So if you want precision, you still want the Oracle data types.
Well, I would always want to use the Oracle because there's I forgot what we've got this in the docs, but there is an example where a really simple calculation gives you like a really wrong number.
Oh wow! So, okay, and that's just JavaScript functionality.
It's the nature of the floating point data type they're using for numbers. So yeah, so at some point I think they lose precision, and then it gets like. It's almost 3, but not 3. It's 2.9998 something. I forgot what the example was, but I can look it up.
The joys of floating point numbers are always, once you've worked with them once, you just like have the flashbacks, right, of the pain.
Yeah, but this is one of the things I haven't really had on my radar when I started looking into the JavaScript world. I said, yeah, of course we need to somehow translate the JavaScript data types to Oracle data types and vice versa. So that's actually it's actually quite a complex topic.
Mm. Yes, type binding and stuff.
Type binding is, yeah. it looks simple if you think about it, but then you get into all the edge cases, and then it's kind of, oh my god, what do I do now?
Yes, that's the thing. Yeah. So I think that's the questions. If let us know how you're getting on with the lab as well. We'd love to hear you progressing. If you're getting stuck anywhere, or please just like say put in the Q&A chat. Tell us how you're getting on. Yeah. But yeah, we can hang around for a while to kind of help support you work through this.
Yeah, I'll be here until the end of the session. So we've got 15:36 on my clock, so I'll be here until a few minutes past 4 o'clock. So
Yeah.
any questions? Really good questions so far. Keep them coming.
Mm.
Until then, I'll probably go on mute and wait for more questions to come up.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's kind of there's a lot of, like I say, a lot of detail, things like these data types and stuff. You think, oh, how hard can it be to just import another language? And then there's all these little details, isn't it? Right.
Yeah. Well, one thing that really helped was the introduction of the JSON data type in Oracle Database 21c. So that on its own, I think it may have prompted me to consider upgrading to 21c, because the JSON data type is an absolutely amazing construct. The constructor can take any number of arguments and translates it into JSON, it feels like. And in Database 23c, you can even convert from abstract data types that you define in PL/SQL to JSON and vice versa. So making it really, really simple to kind of add REST support, for example, to existing applications without having to write a conversation layer on top. So that's pretty cool. And it's also super fast to work with. In JSON and JavaScript, they are a really good combination. So it's super easy to work with JavaScript and JSON.
Yeah, it's cool. Okay, there's a question coming about. So, task 2, a module is created with the code in. With a PL/SQL package, one creates the spec and the body separately. Presumably, this is not the case with MLE modules.
I can't see. Is that in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, let me have a look. Oh, here we go. In task 2, a module is created with the code in PL/SQL package. One creates the spec and the body separately. No, you don't need to. So the you will. I think you will see this later, but yeah, because you don't have the function's body in the call specification, you will get away with either a procedure or a function or a package header. You don't see JavaScript code in the package body. And this is specifically interesting if you mix and match, because that's also something you can do. So when I get started, I wanted to use some of the Swing Bench code and replace that with JavaScript. So in the end, what I did is I created the MLE module with the code that I replaced from PL/SQL and rewritten it in JavaScript. And then there was no change to the API that Swing Bench was using, like the PL/SQL frontend, because instead of the code being in the package body, the same function just pointed to a JavaScript module. And that way you can mix and match PL/SQL and JavaScript if you want to. So you could, if you wanted to replace PL/SQL, you could do that gradually. There is no requirement for a big bang.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have a couple more questions coming in. Are there any optimizations for a PL/SQL function containing JavaScript that runs a SQL query? So I guess you've got PL/SQL calling JavaScript that calls SQL.
It all works the same way, and it works the same way as in PL/SQL and Java. So there is no optimization to my knowledge.
I would say there is sort of an optimization, which is one of the reasons you kind of hinted at you said for using JavaScript, and that's if you've got your existing JavaScript in the application code, by moving it into the database, you remove the network, right? And
right. Sorry. Yeah. I was thinking of, is there any like a fast in the database, but that's not something I'm aware of. But the benefits obviously are data locality. So especially when it comes to migrating to cloud environments. And I've done that as a consultant a few times where just one part of the application was moved. Say, let's take one example. You take the database and you run the database in the cloud, but you keep your app tier on premises, and you've got a VPN connection or a fast connect or what have you between your database and your app tier, and your users continue to connect to the app tier as they always did. Now, the problem is the latency between your on-premises environment and the database increases. I mean, even if it increases just a millisecond or two, it's if you multiply this with a huge workload, it becomes noticeable. So the instead of just doing a lookup in the database and returning the data back to the application tier for calculations, especially if you touch lots of records, that quickly becomes a bottleneck, and I've seen that in the past. So what I've always liked to do is move the calculation, if possible, into the database. So then it would just be one REST call, invoke this core specification, which calls PSQL or JavaScript, what have you, and because the logic is where the data are, there is no latency, and you can make use of the typically higher CPU and memory resources on the database server. You typically have better disk or storage subsystems, and this is where you win, in my opinion.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great point. It's like eliminate the round trips, but there's no special optimizations for the SQL itself. It's more about eliminating that network, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, a couple of actually, someone's had a question about how do you paste into the terminal window?
Yeah, so you can either use the edit paste in the terminal window, or you do Shift Control V. So let me see if I can show you. So launching the workshop, launch remote desktop. So this will bring up my connection, and let's start here and create a schema. So for instance, I want to copy this particular gray box's content. I can say copy here, and then I can either say edit paste, or the shortcut here is Shift Control V. So if I hit Shift Control V, it does the same thing. I'm not connected.
Cool.
Yeah, but this is way faster. And if you want to copy something onto your clipboard on your laptop, there is a clipboard here as well. So you can see this was on the clipboard. And if you want to have something else, you can say, I hope I get this right now. Oh, there you go. I mean, it's already here. So this is now on your clipboard. And then you can paste this on whatever text editor you use for note keeping, if you want to. So there is that as well.
Cool. All right. So here's an interesting question as well. Since JavaScript is a technology on the client side, now it's running in the database. For example, one of the uses I have is in Apex when we need to fetch millions of rows. The user machine is important to store this info in the cache on the client side.
Okay. One of the use cases I have like this. I need to fetch millions of rows.
Oh yeah, I think my question is why you need to store it on the cache on the client side in the first place, right? What's the reason for doing that?
Yeah, is this? I mean, it would be nice to get some more details. I mean, are you ingesting data as kind of an ETL process, or is I mean, typically, I mean, there is if you develop something like a front end and you would like to present information to the user, I remember Tom Kite once where he said you probably don't need to fetch millions and millions of rows because that's like search engine results. So you get 42,000 pages of results, but you only ever look at pages 1, 2, and maybe 3. So every record after that, you may as well not fetch. So in this case, I would use a SQL query and just use pagination using fetch first, n rows, make that a bind variable, offset so and so. So that would be easier. I wouldn't want to fetch millions of rows.
Neither would I.
No, that's going to cause problems. But I'm not entirely sure if I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, I think it's we need to understand your use case to kind of help answer what the difference is or how moving this into the database might help you. but it's JavaScript's just a language essentially, and the difference is you can now run it inside the database instead of having to go from a middle tier application to the database.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, as we said, for like data intensive, like if it's something where you really do need to process millions of rows, then actually moving it into the database, as we just were talking about eliminating that network, then being able to do that in the database can make a significant difference, right? But we need to understand a bit more why you're doing that. Right?
But happy to chat. So if you want to elaborate, feel free.
Yeah, just let us know, because I'm curious, right? What's the use case? Why is the how does this work?
Oh, thank you. Somebody said commenting on the development. Yeah, we the one of the really cool things for working with these technologies is that I was bending the ear of one of the PMs, Jeff Smith. So what you can do in the Live Lab is you can just say odds serve, and it will bring up odds, and it's one of the most recent versions, is 23.3, and you can just create a new window and then connect to, well, if it takes the focus. No.
No, you've got to tell Google
I
whether
got it.
you agree to giving them all your data.
API, and I think it's odds. I haven't created the account yet, but let's go to the landing page. So in ORDS, what you can do, you can go to SQL Developer Web, and after you also enable the schema that you're using, you've got the SQL interface, which you may know from SQL Developer from the desktop application, but there is now kind of a tile inside the SQL Developer Web, which allows you to use code highlighting, syntax highlighting, code completion, and it also tells you certain things about stuff that you may have mistyped, which happens to me all the time.
I think it happens to all of us all the time, right?
Yeah. The other thing that we're not covering in this Live Lab, because it would have been too much, in my opinion, is Apex. The Application Express was one of the first tools that allowed you to create JavaScript in the database. So there is, in the SQL workshop, you can go there, you know that you can run SQL, you can run PSQL. And if Apex detects a 21C database or 23C database as its runtime, it also allows you to run JavaScript. So you could just type JavaScript snippets into Apex, click on run, and it would do it. The Apex team have made it very easy to work with the JavaScript objects that we exposed in the global scope. So you can make calls to the database really easily. And also you can have dynamic actions now in JavaScript. You can have, you can associate JavaScript with button clicks and so on and so forth. So JavaScript and Apex have had a stable relationship for a long time now. And they were the first to really adopt the functionality.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew like they say JavaScript and Apex fit together quite well, but I didn't realize you could actually do it directly in that workship. That's quite cool.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's. Now I'm very grateful for everyone in the Apex development team, and they're really, really, really open to suggestions, and they had lots of input as well. So there's been really good collaboration between the teams for a long time now.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we'll see more. Well, we'll see how these things progress, right? In terms of how people take it up or not, and what people would like to see more of, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I mean, if you've got anything you think we could do differently, or maybe you find something a little quirky, or it could be improved, or maybe it's good, like the comment from before, feel free to let us know. I'm certainly very keen on feedback. It's one thing to have a product ready, but it should really be for everyone to use and as simple and as accessible as possible.
Exactly. I think that's something, I think we're all keen on here, right? We want to make sure that these products are useful for you, but also easy for you to use, so you kind of don't trip up on basic things, right? Or you can just get started and actually writing code or doing whatever task it is you need to do, rather than fighting with the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
We get another question. Oh, Angel has elaborated. Yes, PC whoever we can.
Okay, so this a follow up to the
to
question
the
about
previous
millions
question.
of rows before. It's called. Okay, interesting.
Well, Apex runs on the database. So there is already a session established, and there is no overhead creating sessions, and it also can do the summing and filtering kind of on the database server side, which is performance-wise, it's good.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting you're saying it's call to the database, wait for the response, but doing this filters some pivot are really fast with JavaScript client side. Is now JavaScript running on the database, or is it the same? It's not the same as what you have now, right? Because
no, it's not the same what you have now, that's for sure. But I'm not entirely sure how you can. I mean, this is a typical ETL problem, right? Where ETL tools just connect against the database and they select lots and lots of rows from the database, transfer all of that data over the wire, do all this aggregation as per the logic defined in the ETL tool, and then just write the results back. That has, I have never seen that faster than if you did this in the database.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing a bit here, and you'll have to fill us in with the details a bit more on what you think's happening. But what I'm guessing is the initial load takes a few seconds or whatever it is to get the data in, but then because it is all client side, you can just use JavaScript to kind of process all that data. So
as part of the load, I mean,
yeah, so you can do some filtering on it once it's there. So having like you say with that ETL process, you just load it all in, which takes a few seconds or whatever. But because it's all local, then it's quicker than another round trip to the database and refetch all the data. So it's kind of, I think that's, yeah, it's definitely putting that code into with JavaScript into the database would definitely be different because it's not on the client. But I would be curious as to what those queries are and why this ends up being faster than just running the queries individually.
Yeah, that maybe Angel, if you would like to drop me an email, we can follow this off. I can follow up with you offline. Sorry, because that's really something I'm now genuinely curious.
I'm curious too. I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're interested in it's okay for you. Let me type my email address into the chat. Bad fingers. Can't type when I'm being watched.
No, nobody can. He's just like, fat fingers.
There we go. Oh yeah, I should probably have sent that to everyone. That doesn't help. To everyone. So there we go. Cool.
Yeah.
But genuinely interested in the process. There's always something to learn. A day when I learn something new is a good day.
Exactly. It's always fun to learn something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're getting close to the hour.
Close. Yeah, we're getting close to the hour. So let me do what I was threatening up on doing. So first of all, as I said, I'd be very surprised if everyone had finished. I mean, the workshop is quite comprehensive. and it covers a lot of areas. And sometimes you need to look at code twice to let it sink in to understand what it does. So I'm really happy that so many people have joined us for this session, and you've been getting on with the live lab. Any feedback, I'm more than happy to take, good or bad. On the screen, you see a few resources that we've created that you can use for free, where you start to get your feet wet and dip your toes into the new technology. And let's see if we can answer a few more questions before we need to wrap up. So what do we have? Do you know when free TDB are going to be 23 CDB? Richard is asking. No, I don't know, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be when 23C is full GA, which will be sometime in the next year or so, but we don't know the timescales.
We don't know yet.
You know, when it's ready, right? It'll be available to you when it's ready. Okay, so yeah. But
you keep an eye on social media when it's exploding.
Yes.
I guess
yes.
it's like,
yeah, if you follow us, you will definitely know. We'll make sure you know when it's available. But
yes.
we don't have exact timescales at this point.
Okay, so there is another question. If we use some validation function in the browser and can use JS on the server side, may some attackers think probably they use the same function on the server side. So you could try and find a bug in the validation function just on the client side and probably do the same attack. Isn't that a risk? Yeah, that's a really good question. Supply chain attacks are a real thing in all open source projects. And so whenever you use an open source module as part of your code, then you potentially affect it in one way or another. Because any vulnerabilities becomes public, any CVEs that get published on NPM, if you're using the same version or an older version of the same module, you are likely vulnerable to the same attack vector. So what we would like, what we are suggesting in the documentation is that you use the metadata field, which you can associate. Every MLE module has a version and a metadata you can associate with it. So you say, for example, validator, you store the same version that you pulled from NPM as the version for that module. Then you can, in other cases where you've got kind of dependencies between modules that you're storing in the database, you can also use the metadata field to store what we call a software bill of materials. So you can then, like a package JSON, for instance, you would know exactly which code has been deployed against the database and in which release. And next CVE comes up, all you need to do is query the data dictionary to figure out, am I vulnerable or am I not vulnerable? And if so, go and replace the module you're using with the module containing the fix. So that's one of the big benefits of using this in the database.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but like I say, it is a risk and it's something you need to be careful of, right?
It's the same thing with all open source projects and any projects, right? So you need to know what am I using and where am I using this, so to be able to mitigate quickly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's cool to see you've got that metadata, like you say, to help you track and manage it. So if you notice a vulnerability, at least you can stay on top, hopefully, and patch things.
Exactly. It'll be just a select statement against the dictionary, and you know exactly which version of which module did I deploy when. So that's probably as good as it gets.
All right. Okay, cool. I think that's it.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Any other final things you want to say, or no? Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. All right then. I'll just kind of say, really big thanks to you, Martin, for putting the live lab together and walking us, getting us up and running, talking about JavaScript, answering all these questions. I say lots of great questions coming in. I would love to hear what you kind of think of this format of these office hours where we're walking through a live lab. I haven't done one before, so I'd love to hear, if there's something you'd like to see us do for other topics or the SQL things, just let me know. If you don't like it, either way, we want to know so we can help serve you better, basically. Otherwise, you know, it's only just the start of December, but I'm going to be finishing a week or so before Christmas, so it's almost goodbye for the holiday season now, right? Um, so I think all that's left to say is I really hope you enjoy this. More than importantly, I hope you learned something. Enjoy the holiday season. Hope you have a safe, happy, healthy, fun holidays, and we'll see you in the next year, right?
Thank you
Goodbye.
very much. Bye.